Okay, welcome everybody today. We're delighted to see so many people in the room and online. Today we're covering a session from our Facilitate project. The Facilitate project was an Innovative Health Initiative EU Commission project, and one of the key elements of the project was looking at returning individual participant data in clinical trials by design, and I'm glad we're able to present that to you today. I want to thank our MEP Vytenis Andriukaitis for inviting us and hosting us here today. And I'm going to pass over to you now to give us some welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much that you allowed me to be host, because it's always very easy to be host and then to see how you can equip me with some new ideas and new proposals, Okay, it's my pleasure to welcome you today in the Parliament at our event, Returning Individual Participant Data in Clinical Trials by Design. Excellent topic.
Yes.
Then I will say a little bit more. Today's event centers on the finding of the European Facilitate framework for clinical trial participants' data reutilization. Excellent name, Facilitate. For our fully transparent and ethical ecosystem. This ambitious initiative, funded under the Innovative Medicine Initiative, began on 1st of January 2022 and will conclude at the end of this year, and marking 4 years of dedicated work across Europe, and thanks you a lot for that. Facilitate started from a clear and compelling premise. Clinical trial participants should have access to the health data collected about them, and that data should be able to support both their ongoing care and future research. Although clinical trials generate vast amounts of high-quality information, this information is rarely returned to participants and often remains siloed in separate repositories, inaccessible even for research reuse. Facilitate aims to change this. It is a very important topic. Can you imagine what do we have now in our 27 member states? For example, in Lithuania, we have biobanks, bioregistries, we have separate registries, we have university hospitals, we have excellent centers, and they are all connecting data, but nobody knows how they can interface and intertwine and to be interoperable, and to interconnect such data, and to elevate such data, because data is today a very important tool, but we need to protect people's rights and to be very ethical and to be very, very sensitive to the data. That is important. What makes Facilitate especially innovative in this intention, not only to enable data portability, but also to reshape the role of patients in the design and governance of clinical trials. For years, this shift has been discussed in the context of the new EU clinical trials regulation. But Facilitate is putting it into practice. It aims to empower individuals to move from being passive recipients for care to active, informed participants, aware of their data, their rights, and their essential role in the research ecosystem. And now I want to tell you once again, ecosystem. I can show you finally what I mean in this case. But patients in the ecosystem can play crucial role. Nothing about us without us. You remember? Nothing about us without us. Researchers, do you agree? Clinicians, do you agree? If yes, it means that we need to understand nothing about us without us. It means that access to personalized data is a right of every patient. It's not source of clinical researchers or multinational corporations. No, it's our right for every individual. The project work spans the entire data life cycle. At each step, the goal is to ensure legal certainty, ethical integrity, very difficult word, ethical integrity. Today we are facing moral crisis around all countries, especially at highest level. If you see some leaders speaking about something without ethics and without moral obligations, it's a challenging situation. And crucially, alignment with the voices and expectations of those most affected, patients, clinicians, hospitals, academia, and industry. FACILITATE is supported by a broad and diverse consortium, including patients, associations, universities, healthcare professionals, pharmaceutical companies. This diversity reflects a core principle of the project. Meaningful progress in data governance requires all stakeholders at the table. And here we are now, all stakeholders. Okay. But today's event offers us the opportunity to reflect on this work and to consider what it means for the future clinical research in Europe. FACILITATE challenges us to reimagine a system where transparency, trust, and participation and involvement are embedded not as an optional enhancements, but as a pillar of good research practice and good clinical practice. I hope that we will have very fruitful discussions. But as I promised to you, I have in my hands now declaration on the European Innovation and Care Ecosystem for Rare Complex Diseases. We will organize at 9, 10th, and 11th of December here in Brussels, in President's Palace, and then in this house, conference proposing to establish pan-European ecosystem for research, investment, innovations, and education, keeping in mind European reference networks, because those networks now are, I was proud to be one of launching fathers of this network in 2017. And now we have in all 27 member states, 1,600 centers of excellence and more than 400 hospitals. And in every hospital, you can find clinical trials. And ethics, data, protection, patients are in such ecosystem as cornerstone. And we're just proposing move forward and unite our European reference networks together with our biobanks, bioregisters, biomarker systems, together with our 1 million genomic system. Newborn screening is very important. Also, it's about patients' rights, and also about ethics, about transparency, and of course also including AI factories. We have now 18 AI factories, and keeping in mind possibility to develop European health data space. But without ethics, without transparency, is no way. And without restoration of trust in science. What is my proposal? Please do today very excellent job debating issues, and then please pass your messages to us, and then we will sign declaration, and we'll pass the declaration to you, to all, and to see when we can, maybe we can move in such direction and to make big progress in Europe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the second part of our opening session. We have a keynote address from Elmar Nimmelsgren, who's from the European Commission. I'm hoping you're online, Elmar. Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you well.
Yeah, great. So Elmar has been in the European Commission since 2000, and he's working on all elements of health research, including the Innovative Medicines Initiative. Prior to that, he's worked in industry in Vertex Pharmaceuticals in Massachusetts and is a biochemist by training. So I'm going to pass over to you for your keynote address, Elmar. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. And it's really a great pleasure for me to be giving here some remarks today on behalf of the European Commission services. And thanks for the organizers for having invited me, and sorry that I cannot be there in person today. At the start of my intervention, I want to really congratulate the Facilitate project on the important work you have carried out and are conducting still today. The project was, as we already heard, was funded from the EME2 Innovative Medicines Initiative 2 program, the predecessor to our current Innovative Health Initiative joint undertaking. And these programs really for us from Commission Services side are very important to advance health innovations in Europe. And the Facilitate project in the portfolio of projects of IMI and IHI project is really key for contributing to the priorities of our work. And these projects show, and Facilitate in particular shows that it can provide value beyond scientific deliverables alone. Again, as we already heard in the excellent introduction by Mr. Andriukaitis. The Facilitate project addresses the important aspect of sharing data of clinical trial participants in an ethically acceptable manner. And this project is part of larger efforts from the Commission side to strengthen clinical research in Europe. The importance of that was very much highlighted last year by the reports from both of them, incidentally, former Italian Prime Ministers, Mr. Draghi and Mr. Letta, and both really have in their comprehensive reports pointed to the need and importance of clinical research and for doing more in Europe to do so. And that means new initiatives, but it also means doing better perhaps what we already have. We have a clinical trials regulation, we have lots of other legislation, and we try to improve the implementation of all of that and the operation of clinical trials in Europe. For example, with our accelerating clinical trials in the EU initiative, where we come together between Commission services, the European Medicines Agency and the member states. There is, for example, a stakeholders group in this initiative, which includes very importantly patient representatives, and the stakeholders group and all stakeholders provide important input on improve clinical research through initiatives in the ACT-EU program. Perhaps you have seen that in July this year, the European Commission published a communication called Choose Europe for Life Sciences. And that communication covers life sciences more broadly, not just medical research, but also biotechnology, plant-related biotechnology, and so on. But in this, clinical research is really very prominent and highlighted as an important important for Europe and for European patients. And it also outlines a number of initiatives that we want to take to strengthen clinical research. And one of them that is explicitly pointed out as a flagship initiative is what is called in that document an investment plan for clinical research in Europe. And so now on Commission Services side, we are actively working on preparing this initiative. And as part of this work, we are organizing an invitation-only workshop in 2 weeks' time. And in that workshop, we want to explore various aspects for how we can promote clinical research in Europe. And here I just want to give a few highlights. Importantly, we need to look at research infrastructures. We already have some infrastructures that serve clinical research and clinical trials in Europe, but we want to look at how we can perhaps better use them, the ones we have, identify gaps, and so on. Perhaps even better consider the needs of end users. We want, in some countries, have what is called a single entry point for clinical trials. Well known, for example, in Denmark, it's called Trial Nation. So if you want to run a clinical trial, you contact Trial Nation and they will help you identify how you best run your clinical trial. So we want to look, is there something we can learn from this national level initiative for Europe? Can we perhaps interlink these? Because if we want to run multinational clinical trials, it's nice if we can quickly get a trial going in Denmark, but for quite a few conditions, Denmark and many other EU countries will not be big enough for running the trial. So we need to run multinational clinical trials. We already heard about rare diseases where practically all clinical trials have to be multinational clinical trials. So that is another aspect we want to look at. And then, of course, the eternal question on how do we fund all this clinical research. We have, through our programs at EU level, we have money, and we are very proud of being able to support subclinical trials. But of course, that is quite limited. How can we better bring together different funding streams at member state level from philanthropic organizations? So that is certainly something that we want to look at. And then the last element I want to mention is the key role of small and medium-sized enterprises. They're really key players for innovation. I happen to have worked at this company, which at the time was very much an SME, which was able in the United States to grow to a quite substantial and big company. And of course, we want these kind of things to happen in Europe. And in health innovation, that means to run clinical trials. So how can we support these small players to better, to better bring their innovations forward? And with that, I want to conclude what I said about our plans, and I would really like to wish the project partners of the Facilitate project all the best for the next half year that you still have in your project until summer. And then also very often it's our experience that these projects actually bring their full fruition and results even after the project has ended. So all the best for that, and I really look forward to the discussions today and the remainder of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that support. We're going to move on now to the presentation of the Facilitate results. We have Johanna Blom, who's the Deputy Facilitate Coordinator. She's the Professor of Psychobiology at the University of Modena. She's also the Chair of the Ethical Committee for Research in the University of Modena and is heading an initiative to develop guidelines for common legal and ethical framework for receiving consent from minors. And along with Johanna, we have Chris Woolston, who's the Global Health Head of Science Policy at Sanofi and is the project lead for this. So we're going to spend the next 20 minutes discussing between Johanna and Chris about the main results from the project. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nuala, and thank you everybody for being here and for the invitation, because I think we are very proud to present you the data that we have, or the results we have developed in a journey that for now has almost taken 4 years. And Chris and I were talking yesterday how we were going about this. And what we decided is that we were going to continue our conversation. Why? Because this result comes from discussion, from confrontation, from continuously talking about words and trying to come together and find consensus. And that's why we continue our discussion today and have a look behind the scenes, because it seems easy. And when I look at it, it's like, did we just do that? No, it was a painful process of coming together, of putting different stakeholders' needs and vision together. And I'm very happy to have had Chris as partner along this way, because we managed to listen to each other. And I think that is the most important part. If you have to do this, if you want to make progress and return data to participants, first of all, we have to learn how to listen. And that's what we have learned, I think, along the way. So let's start and see what we actually did. So we have a white paper out that is called Return of Individual Participant Data by Design. And we will explain to you why the by design part is incredibly important for this, to become part of general practice, maybe of good clinical practice. So why are we here? participants almost never receive individual level data. And Chris would say, well, yes, yes, and no.
So am I supposed to use this microphone?
You have to speak up because.
Okay. Yes, and first of all, Joanna, thank you so much. That was such a kind introduction. But I've got to say it's been an exciting and fun journey that we've been on together for this. And you're absolutely right. And I think one of the strengths of Facilitate, I think, and one of the lessons we've learned from this is the ability to understand the other's perspective. So I'm here. I do work for Sanofi. I'm not speaking for Sanofi here. I'm not speaking for the industry here. I'm speaking for myself here. But I think, to pick up on this slide, I think the statements on this slide are true, but I think they require a little bit of context. So what Joanna just gave me the lead into is, yes, participants almost never receive individual level data. First of all, that's not because there is any intention to prevent people receiving their own data. And it's also, I think, largely because there has not been a systematic or structured or scalable way of doing it. Right. And I think that's, for me, that is what Facilitate is bringing to this. It's like, it's not that we don't want to do this. It's just that we don't have any way of doing this. And, if we can find a path to a solution, at least in a European context, of being able to do this, then I think we're all in.
Yeah. And I think that is especially true if you connect to what you introduced us to, because what we need is transparency. And if we are going to make it happen, we need transparency, we need trust. And that's where Facilitate started off with. We created an ethical framework so people would feel protected and their rights considered. We discovered, but it's not discovering, it's, I think, almost intuitive. But then you look at the reality and it's not, because we have an incredible amount of opportunity that is not used. So what the RoIPD framework does, it is looking how to make people feel that they can control or use what they gave to some extent. So empower them, make it transparent. If you do not have anything to hide and the process is transparent and I receive my data that were part of a clinical trial, it's much easier to talk to each other, and trust is something that you have to build up. It can start, it can find a place. It also offers better decision-making, and I think improves trustworthiness also for industry.
Yes, and speaking as a member of one of the least trusted industries, anything we can do in that respect, I think we should be doing. And I mean, the main point I wanted to make here is there is no intent to withhold information. Right? Like I said, previously, it's about trying to find a way to make it work. And by doing that, I think you're absolutely right. It builds at least a better relationship with the participants in our clinical trials, and I think will help to build that trustworthiness. And I think also help to build, future participation in clinical trials, and particularly, your comments about in a European context as well. I think this is really important for us as an industry.
So if there are so many reasons and opportunities, why is it not happening, right? Because you say, do it. But actually, there is no legal mandate to return individual participant data. That's one, and that's a big problem in Europe. There is a lot of uncertainty, has been, still is, and will continue around the GDPR, how it's used in different countries. The clinical trial regulation is continuously changing, and it should, because we are changing in our approach to clinical research. There is no infrastructure, there is no clear responsibility, and we will come back to that on the responsibility. part. And no design phase planning. So these are all very valid reasons why it is not happening. But it doesn't mean that you cannot do it. And
So just to pick up, I think particularly on GDPR and clinical trial regulation, and Elmer also made some comments about this. I mean, we absolutely welcome any efforts to simplify those regulations because, and we'll get onto this later in the presentation, I think, but running a clinical trial in a European context, a multinational, multi-regional clinical trial with hundreds of sites and thousands of participants is already an incredibly complex thing. Yeah. So we need to be looking at how do we simplify that rather than how do we add complexity to it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, we are for simplicity.
We're proposing that we need to have pan-European clinical trial framework.
Yes.
Because if you are going into every member state, you have 27 different ethics committees, 27 different implementation of directives, because it's national specificity, 27 different languages, 27 different actors and regulatory bodies. There are jungles, and our clinical trials in the EU are going down from 62,000 till 43,000. Now we are in decline. Why am I arguing about necessity to build pan-European ecosystem? Of course, not against national regulation. We need to have supranational and supranational flow and supranational pan-European contract, pan-European requirements, pan-European regulation, especially multinational clinical trials, which require a lot of factors. Sorry to intervene.
No.
And if I can just pick up, I'm just going to hijack our conversation here.
No,
but
you're not.
The length of time and the complexity of making a simple protocol change in a multi-regional clinical trial in the European context is very significant.
That's why. That's why Facilitate deliberately did not avoid it to choose building a single technical solution. So instead, we created ethical, legal, and participant-centric approaches that sponsors and sites can adapt to. And the fourth pillar of Facilitate at a glance is the operational part, which I think is the most difficult one, because ethical principles, we have a base, and actually in Facilitate, we expanded on that base. Legal, we have to deal with what is there right now. We cannot just invent things. But the operational part is a difficult part, I think.
It is, and again, my perspective on this is the large industry-sponsored multi-regional clinical trials, and they are already an incredibly complex machine, right? So if we're going to introduce something new, which I think we should, I'm not arguing negatively here at all. I want this to happen, but it has to be done with a clear understanding of, how do we do this in a way that is practical and feasible and scalable and sustainable.
If I may, I can draw attention to this immediately, because our data protection is based on consumer understanding, not on patient understanding. It's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. It requires then a lot of, it's not consumer approach. It should be patient approach. We need to simplify from this way. Conceptual, it's absolutely different one. I fight, and being commissioner, when we started to discuss in the commission about general data protection, we saved something to allow science and researchers to have such a, otherwise it would from the beginning it was so consumer-based approach, like in simple, goods. It's not the same. We need to think, sorry for interrupting.
But I think the next slide is something that we all should fix, and which is the essence of our RoIPD approach. It is patient-centric. That means that they become co-creators of their necessities within the protocol that is going to be. It's not yet there. So they are there from the onset. It is by design. It means it is automatically incorporated in the design phase. And that makes it easy to understand. You don't have to invent it. It's there. It becomes a part of the practice. And maybe the most important part, the flexibility. We opted for not a one-size-fits-all because there are different trials, different trial types, different disease areas, different needs, and different ways of implementing, I think. And those three pillars, patient-centric, by design, and flexible, are what you have to take away from here. We can just talk. We will continue to talk.
Yeah, I can.
No?
No, because, yeah, these three pillars, we first declined them in ethical principles, because what you have to give back should be used autonomously. That's what we added to the principles. It should be useful, so we added utility. And it should empower. Of course, and it's something Chris always comes back to, the beneficence and non-maleficence part is what you start from. And we added on in Facilitate. Actually, we created a new ethical framework that makes it easier to accommodate these new principles. But I think, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I know we're very short on time, so I'm trying to limit.
6 minutes.
Six minutes left. Okay. All right. But I think when it comes to particularly beneficence and non-maleficence, we have to understand that within the whole data that is collected within the course of a clinical trial, there is some data which is, you would say, clinically validated, clinically meaningful, certainly, absolutely something that would be useful and valuable to the participant. But there are also data which are experimental, which are not clinically validated. And from an ethical perspective, it would be wrong for us to be sharing data with a participant that might actually mislead their medical decision making. And I could draw attention to a particular president of the United States who has gone on record as giving medical advice to people about the use of paracetamol, which is completely not based in any medical basis. And we really want to avoid the situation of giving people information which is not valid in their healthcare journey.
He proposed much more,
No,
fight against COVID.
yes. But very, very understandable. And but we are more morally acting people. Let's say it like that. And do not do that. You're not going to. I, as a physician, would never ever give data back if I'm not sure about that, because it would be harmful. So what we have to deal with, and I think that we can go over fast, is that all this has to happen in a European context, which is made of the clinical trial regulation, the GDPR, and then there is RoIPD. So how to fit this in these two things? Well, that has been ground for a lot of discussion, because in the end, what happens is that there is no lawful, the lawful basis for giving back individual data has to be consent right now. And things might change, but right at this moment, that is what we need to do. And that doesn't mean that it's not the consent to take part in a trial. It is consent to receive your individual data if you wish so. It's always your decision. And so the basis for this is consent, which will have to be incorporated in the process as it becomes part of a clinical trial. So what we all have to understand is where we are right now. So, and the Facilitate project has made a major shift in thinking, because right now you have a right to ask for your data. It is participant initiated. And Facilitate has flipped that with their RoIPD approach and makes it sponsor initiated. That is completely different because sponsors, whatever sponsor, academic, industrial, is putting it out there. You can access your data if you wish so. And I think that is difficult, but it's doable and it is revolutionary. So the consent then is consent that should include explanation on what data, what data you're going to return, when you can reliably return it, how, in what format you're going to return it, who is going the person to return it to you. And participants have many ideas about that. I mean, I want my physician to tell me, I just want access to a platform and I deal with it myself. There are many different ways. And the last point, you always have the right to withdraw or not do it. It is always if you wish so.
So just coming in there, I mean, I think one of the things, and we talked about flexibility on an earlier slide, I think it's important to see a balance between, if you like, ultimate customizability and absolute prescription. I think we need to find that sweet spot in the middle where, yes, there's flexibility, but probably tending towards like a templated approach where in this particular context, this is likely to be the mechanism that we use. And of course, up front, there needs to be discussion not with participants, because we don't have participants in trials until we've started the trial, but with representatives who can speak on behalf of participants and help us to structure, what the plan looks like within parameters. Okay.
Yeah. So we have little time. These are the very important parts, but what is even more difficult is operationalize it and define the roles. And that is difficult because sponsors have to do it from their side. And it's a cost. There's a cost to it. You have to plan. You have to create the infrastructure, which is not there yet. You have to make it feasible. It has to be doable for the organizations. Sites are going to be major players because they have to communicate. And in some instances, they will be the one deputated to return. So we can go to the next slide because there are two important parts. This is important, and Chris already talked about it. It is the timing matters. When can you give reliably back? During a trial, not so easy. Sometimes possible, but not easy. After the trial, yes, that is practice. Now, how you are going to do that is another thing. And so we came up with a staged approach depending on what data are validated.
And just for clarity, the reason why there is some data that cannot be returned during the trial is because a trial is typically run in a blinded fashion so that people don't know whether on the control arm or the treatment arm. And if we return data during the trial, it could unblind the study, which from a data integrity point of view is a disaster. And, it could lead to the regulator rejecting the data package that goes forward, and then everybody has wasted their time and money and put themselves at risk for no reason. So that's why some data cannot be returned until after the study.
I think we will treat two more slides about how we're going to be about it. Go and
very quickly.
Yes, it's very quickly. This one. Do this one.
Yeah, sure.
Can you move one over?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so I think from a sponsor perspective, and we need to think that there are a multiplicity of different sponsors. I mean, I'm speaking more from the context of large, industrial sponsor. But, there is a need to work with the site and with patient representatives in order to put the plan together. It has to be designed before the trial starts, as we've already said. And, you know, you have to have all of the pieces in place in order to make this work, including, and Joanna's already mentioned it, we pay the sites in order to run studies for us. So there's a contract, and various things have to be built into the contract. They have to be built into the budget. All of this stuff has to be worked out well in advance if we want to be successful here.
So then the last thing I think what is important is to consider what work do we have in front of us. And so we have created a roadmap. And that means that we have to work, and we will work towards that in the last months of Facilitate, towards shared templates, towards implementing really the ethical standards that we have set out, and to find alignment. Politics is important. Policy, as a result, is important. And then the last point, scalable structures. We at Facilitate believe in starting small, testing, adjusting, learning, and bringing it up to scale. And that's where we are now, I think.
Thank you so much, Johanna and Chris. We're going to move on now to a short presentation from Daniela Quaggia, who's from the Active Citizenship Network, and I've had the pleasure of working with her on the stakeholder work package over the last few years. So I'll pass over to you to talk about the principles.
Yes, thank you. I'll be very brief. So I'm introducing the Facilitate principles. So a brief slide-based summary that distills the project works into a few fundamental concepts. And this serves as a first non-technical document to help spread awareness of the new approach Facilitate propose. So the aim is to share the return of individual participant data, because you have to become a feasible, meaningful, and routine part of research practice. And over the past weeks, we have shared this document, these slides, with a wide range of civic and patient associations to seek their endorsement, and I'll update you afterwards how it went. So I'll show you the slides. The contest has been shown by Joanna and Chris, and I'll go quick. And we share why return individual data is important. So first of all, because it is a participant wish, it enables an informed decision, it builds trust and transparency in research, and it shows that taking part has value and may support future engagement. So returning data is not a courtesy. It's a powerful way to recognize contribution, improve decision, and strengthen research culture. But concretely, how it can help? So it can provide clear picture of your health, improve care, and also reduce participant burden, for example, if you duplicate tests, and support, as said, the medical management. And the three words they said before are our approach. So first of all, participant-centric, by design, and flexible. And here are the principles. So they are 6, and we are trying to be clear and operational. So the first one is plan it from day one. So clearly define what will be returned, how, and when. So until the end and the post-trial. So the second one is put participants first. So co-design the protocol with representative patient groups and ensure meaningful and consistent involvement. The third one is provide equitable access. So offer similar access across sites, countries, and population. Be transparent and accountable. So make clear who does what, when, and how, and offer participant accessible support channels. The fifth is support understanding. So use plain language and, when needed, a clinical touch point. And training should be provided for all stakeholders involved to ensure they are well prepared. the last but not least, as we said, it's learn and improve. So measure delivery and experience, address gaps, embed lesson learned in future trials, and share success and challenges. As said, we start circulating the principles among patient and citizens associations and inviting them to endorse the document. As for today, we have more than 50 endorsements and the number is still growing. So I thank you because most of the associations are here today and connected. We have 75 people connected from the online connection for their enthusiastic engagement. I'll show you the associations. And at the end, you can see that some research institutes have also asked spontaneously to endorse the principles, and few of them just publish the principles on their websites because they want to implement the principles, and this tells us something important, that the principles speak to a shared need across the ecosystem. But this is just the first step, so we have to continue to share the principles, the facilitate work, and of course the goal is to be endorsed and embedded and implemented. Thank you.
That's great, and thank you for keeping to time nicely, Daniela. We're going to move on now to our panel discussion, and as we said, there's a lot of stakeholders involved in this project, and we're going to have those stakeholder groups represented on our panel discussion today. We said that patients are the center of this project, so I'm going to start off with to introduce the first member of our panel who's online, Nadia Malu, who's the president of Pain Alliance Europe, which is a leading patient umbrella organization representing people with chronic pain around Europe. And Nadia has been a great participant throughout the project, throughout this whole thing, a member of our patient advisory board. So I'm going to just ask the first question to you, Nadia. Really, what are your perspectives now on the project, on the recommendations, and what are the impacts that you think will happen for patients as a result of this?
So hello everyone from Greece. Normally I would be there with you and I would have my opportunity to have a photo with MEP Andriukaitis again after the 16th of October when I had my first photo with him. Hello, MEP Andriukaitis. And I will start by saying that by using the white paper as it is, it would be, and it is for us in the patient community, a very nice tool, a very nice guideline, if I may say so, to use it in our communities and maybe promote it for everyone. Sitting probably over there, I haven't seen anyone that is there, but it's probably people that come from all possible aspects from the research community that we can actually use to implement from now on, and we can use the white paper as a guiding toolkit to maybe change or shift a little bit how the clinical trials are being done. And why do I say that? Because we actually do need a little bit more of the trust and the bond that we can actually create when we are participating in the clinical trials. You haven't been in touch maybe with the chat coming from the participants in the webinar at the moment, but let me just give you a brief and a concise note from what's happening here, that we, the patient community and the patients, we need what's happening in the Facilitate project. We actually need it. And why is that? Because we need something more standardized happening in the clinical trials, because we don't need to be feeling or be seen as data points, someone nicely said, and I do echo that. We don't need to be just reached out to patient organizations and to patients as individuals just to be recruited for clinical trials, just to participate in clinical trials, and without even having, we do know we have the right to access our data under the GDPR rules, but we do need to have the sense of meaningful participation, and we do need to have everything out in the consent form explained to us in a clear manner, in a patient-friendly terminology, in a very concise way, and we do know what to be expecting in the clinical trial that sometimes takes a long time for us, like 10 months, 12, 18, 2 years. So we do want to know what to expect, when, what timeline, what milestones, and when we are receiving meaningful information about our journey with the medication. So when we are expected to participate, we don't feel like we are blindsided. We do want to build trust with the researchers and the clinicians. So this is very important. And also the transparency and the safety issues that you just mentioned, not about the safety issues about like the medication, which are of utmost importance, but of course, the safety about the information, the data, how meaningful they are going to be for us after the clinical trial, and what we are going to do with them. Because as you can imagine, and MEP Andriukaitis and Chris and Nuala mentioned that sometimes it's rare diseases on the line, and sometimes data can be meaningful for us and our families also. And it's the patient journey that's very important, and we need to feel valued for our contribution to science. So these are all not our hopes and dreams coming into the clinical trial. These are our rights. And the white paper is actually putting forward that particular side of our participation, that it's not a luxury. It's a matter of our rights. And I'm kind of advocating here, but I'm not advocating for myself. I'm advocating for the patient community as a whole. And it just so happens that it's me talking, but it could be any patient sitting here discussing these aspects.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thanks for representing all the patient voices on our panel today. I want to introduce now the second member of our panel, Veronica Francini, sitting here beside me. Data is key to this project. Veronica is a clinical data manager, a member of the executive board of the Italian group of data managers and clinical research coordinators, who are obviously going to be key in this whole process. So I'm going to ask the same question to you, Veronica, in terms of your perspective of the Facilitate recommendations and principles and what impact they'll have on the way you're working.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here with, on behalf of Italian Group Data Manager, a clinical research coordinator. So in contemporary, returning individual data to trial participant is not merely an act of transparency, but a complex, ethically meaningful process demanding scientific accuracy, methodological integrity, and strict data protection. In the context of project Facilitate, the data manager plays a pivotal role in facilitating the return and proper management of clinical research data, ensuring compliance, transparency, and quality and patients' protection. There are different implications. For example, data valorization and acceleration of digital innovation in clinical research. In general, data is no longer just a technical asset, but it becomes a shared resource that can accelerate research and improve patient. Another point is data governance. The data manager must ensure the quality and accuracy and integrity, but timely updates. These include maintaining update standard operation procedures for returned data. From a data manager perspective, we have to facilitate data sharing with external participants. Another point is, for example, data portability and interoperability. It's necessary to implement this standard will allow to data exchange across system. It's very important ensuring for data manager secondary use of data. It is necessary to create and curate data set for data and respecting safety and in the same privacy safeguards. At last, I think it's very important the multidisciplinary collaboration. Data manager work closely with the different stakeholders, professional, researcher, patients, to streamline the trial clinical. It's necessary that, and facilitate the interaction. In conclusion, I think the Facilitate project does more than introducing a new tool, but change a mindset of clinical research. Data manager must be prepared to lead this change. And so ensuring that ethical responsibility, innovation, and patients' empowerment remain, according to me, at the core of the clinical trial practice.
And how do you plan for this, you know, at the start? I mean, what planning is required at the start when you're putting your data structures in place for this to happen in a way that's presented in a way that the patients can understand?
It's very important to create the share for the patients, curate the data. It's very important data quality for the patients, because it's necessary curate particular software with represent the data in all part, amnesis, diagnosis for patients, but the result of clinical trial is fundamental to extend for the patient.
Thank you so much. I'm going to now introduce the third member of our panel. And as has been seen from the presentations, the ethical framework has been really important in terms of ethical framework has been really important. And we have Karen Kroot here, and she is a coordinator of the GDPR working group in the Belgian Association of Research Ethics Committees. She's a PhD researcher, and her research is focusing on the ethical and legal challenges in using health data and human tissues in neuro-oncological research. So, you know, what are your perspectives on the results, you know, really from an ethical point of view in terms of an ethical framework?
Sorry, rookie mistake. So thank you for the introduction, turning on my microphone, and for inviting me here. I've read the white paper with a lot of interest. It was super nice. So I want to begin by just congratulating you on taking on this ambitious project really in an ambitious way, and the results that you already have, because I'm really impressed. It's a complex issue, and the ethical framework has really been built in a very thoughtful way. So I want to start by congratulating you on this. And the focus on the patient that is found throughout the project is also something that really resonates with my work, because as Nola said, I work on the secondary use of health data through a brain tumor case study. And I also look there at participants and how they see their role and the use of their information. And then similarly, as my role in the Medical Research Ethics Committee, we consistently emphasize that ethical research starts with the benefits for the patient. So it was very good for me to see that the patient perspectives are really centered in the projects. And what stood out most for me is how Facilitate approaches the ethical principle of autonomy. Because by designing the return of the participant data into the trial from the outset, this is not just some afterthought or some favor that you do to the participants, but you've really created a framework where this is a participant's right and a participant's need, and an ethically meaningful choice that you are making. And this is a significant step forward. It really also aligns with the growing expectation that clinical trials, they're not only transparent, but they should also be reciprocal. And they should also, always center the patient. And it's also something you see there are new guidelines, GCP guidelines, and there too, the participant is really at the center. However, I wanted to make a note that Chris already noted a bit too. From an ethical perspective, autonomy will never stand alone. You have to look at beneficence and non-maleficence, and those require that the return of these data will actually benefit the patient and not do any harm that is not meant. So clinical data, it can be very emotionally charged, it can be difficult to interpret, but also it can be sometimes clinically unsure. We don't know everything yet in science. And that's also why people have to study years and years and years and years and years to actually be able to interpret those data meaningfully. And what I noticed is that in the white paper at one point, it said that data could be returned through an online interface. However, it's noted that in those cases, participants should be encouraged to consult a healthcare professional who has expertise. So an example would be the return of genetic data. In some countries, there are laws that genetic counseling needs to happen. But for example, in Belgium, I think it would be possible to return genetic data just through an online interface. And that could lead to a patient panicking because they see something that is actually insignificant, but they don't know. Or the other way around, they see something, they are assured, well, actually, there should be some action there. So in those cases, it's super important to have structured, supported return to respect the principles of maleficence and non-beneficence. So it's not just access, it's support. And this support needs to be part of the process. Otherwise, we risk also not respecting the principle of autonomy. Because if you just encourage people to see a healthcare professional and consult them, you are presuming a few things. You are presuming that this person has access to such a healthcare professional who has the expertise and the availability. But also importantly, it's presumed that someone will carry the cost for this consultation. The cost should not be for the patient, for the participant in the trial, but the cost should also not be for the healthcare system that is already very, very thinly stretched. So there are no budgets for this. So more clarity on these points would be good. Otherwise, we risk shifting the responsibility for this from the research system to the individual. And then this autonomy will become a burden instead of a right. But ending positively, like Facilitates, really represents a step forward in my view, because by building the return of the data into the design phase, by articulating these clear ethical principles in the framework that is built and creating this framework that recognizes patients' rights, but also just patient needs, the foundations are laid for a more participant-centered research ecosystem. And I'm genuinely looking forward to see this work in practice and to see how the principles of non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy, and justice can be translated into concrete workable processes that will really benefit patients. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last member of our panel. Sean Byrne is the Associate Director for Science Policy and Regulatory Affairs at the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, or EFPIA. Obviously, industry is sponsoring a lot of the trials and will have to take on the responsibility of putting these processes in place. So I'm interested in your perspective and that of EFPIA in general. Partners, many of which are part of this project in terms of the implications of these recommendations.
No, exactly. And couldn't put it better myself, because I think we welcome the efforts, not just of Facilitate, but of all the parties involved to work towards RoIPD. It's what we need to see. We know that long term. We've seen it in Daniela's presentation too. Participants in trials are increasingly expectant on transparency, on the return of meaningful data, because it helps to also strengthen trust in research. And this is what underpins a good research ecosystem, to use the word again. And we need to see that. And what's crucially important is that Facilitate has shown we can do it within the existing regulatory framework, because we tend, definitely at Brussels level, we tend to complain a lot about GDPR. We complain a lot about the barriers that we face. And what's fantastic to see is that we can actually achieve something. It took 4 years of very hard work when I hear Joanna and colleagues speak, but that's what we need to see, and we need to see it more going forward, not less. We know that recruitment and retention in trials can be complicated, and the return of individual participant data can be a benefit, as long as it's done in the right way, of course, as we pointed out. But it acknowledges the time and the effort and the commitments that participants put in when they join a trial. And it signals respect at a very basic level, and that's something that matters. And what Facilitate has been able to do is, and I don't quote the ethics, Karen has covered it well, but from an industry perspective, it supports patients' autonomy as well as the study integrity, right? Because we need clarity on what can be returned, when it can be returned, how it is returned. And Facilitate gives us a structured approach to start to think about that and to start to implement that in a proper way. It reduces somewhat the uncertainty for participants as well, hopefully, because receiving individual data, I think from a practical perspective, can help a participant in understanding why they engage in a trial in the first place. What is it that my input has resulted in, not just for the trial, but for themselves? And I think patients, rare disease patients particularly, but patients in general, are much more aware of their disease. They're much more aware of the treatment that they're undergoing and receiving. Better informed participants in a trial also tend to stay in a trial longer. They're more consistent. It leads to less misunderstanding between the investigators and the participants, and this being able to return that in a structured way can also foster good work in that respect. I think we've seen from all the discussions, I dare sum up a little bit the discussions we've been having already, but returning of the data is about transparency. As I said, it builds trust. Joanna has said it already, and MEP Andriukaitis, you've also referred to the fact we're undergoing a digital transformation. One aspect of returning individual participant data is demystifying what data is. What's it used for? What's it not used for? When is it meaningful to return it? When is it not? We need this in many elements of life, not just clinical trials, because that means we have a culture of data that works. We have trust and knowledge around how it's being used. It's our digital literacy. But of course, from an industry perspective, clarity is key, right? And the operational feasibility of returning individual participant data has been tough. Facilitate, I think, has taken a massive leap in terms of building in that framework, a consistent process across sites, appropriate data safeguards, and realistic expectations. But it also facilitates practical translation of principles into steps, reducing uncertainty for industry, giving a framework for patients to ask for the data that is theirs. I'll sum it up. I think what we need to see is that these discussions are embedded early in protocol design with a framework that works, and dare I say with shared templates that will make it easier, because it might not be the case in the first instance or in the first few years that the return of participant data is standardized and is harmonized, but at least we're able to work towards it. And now we know we don't need to wait for 4 years of GDPR revisions to do so. I think this is key.
Okay, I think it's come clear there across all of the conversations, the importance of that planning ahead, of that involvement at the beginning, because I think from having that structure in place is important for the ethical review. So if you don't have that in place at the beginning, from the planning for your systems, for the data organization to know what way it's going to be presented. I'm just going to link back to you, Nadia, following, the presentation or the discussion of some of the panel. There was the mention of the non-malevolence. I mean, do you think that this is an issue, or what, I know you and other members of the patient advisory group kind of talked about what information should go back and what shouldn't. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? In terms of what could cause harm versus benefit for the patients?
Well, it's always a discussion. What is what's the line between what could possibly be harmful or not? And I think it's always dependent on the trial, on the data, etc. But I'm absolutely certain when saying that, and this is an ongoing discussion, if you were able to see the discussion at this very moment on the webinar, I mean, that would be your answer. I mean, patients need to be aware of what's happening with their data and and probably sometimes quicker rather than faster rather than later, because at some points this information might be even life-saving. This is an actual comment from the chat, not my comment, but I'm just relaying what I'm actually receiving from the chat. But I think everything should be regulated and should be returned to patients in a very meaningful way and explained and in a very contextualized way. So data, as we have discussed in so many discussions throughout the Facilitate project, in everything that you have done and you have offered to everybody participating, because you have done an enormous amount of work with us and such huge efforts yourself, like Daniela, and like everybody participating and facilitating actually the project. I mean, this have to be done in a very proper manner by someone that knows what type of data and how to actually return it and how to do it, and actually how to explain what's happening. Because if any given patient, they get data unaccompanied by explanations, anybody would be eligible to misconstrue the data and get misguided and maybe even overwhelmed, and that would be the harmful way to return data. And I think even MEP Andriukaitis, he's a doctor himself, everybody can understand what I'm talking about, because if you do not put a nice context around it, then it's like harmful. And because we were discussing AI and digitalization, even if you put it in the AI machine, in the ChatGPT, because it's your individual data, someone needs to know about your medical history. Someone needs to know more details about you. So even if you put it in your ChatGPT friend, if your ChatGPT friend doesn't really know about you and your medical background, even there you can have a harmful outcome. So yes to return of individual data, yes to fast track processes when it's needed, but always coming back to a meaningful way, explanations, and in a contextualized way, so it can actually get always to a beneficial outcome for the patient. So this is a process. Everybody talking today, they have all been mentioning processes and procedures and ethical frameworks. I'm all in favor, because this is the white paper underlying everything and maybe standardizing everything. And there's a reason for doing that. So we won't make mistakes. We won't harm patients. So as long as we are doing it in a standardized and correct way, we won't harm anyone. Everybody is going to be really safeguarded when going into a clinical trial. And if we just follow guidelines, then we can actually get to better outcomes.
That's
so
great.
I think
Thank you.
that's a proper way to do it. So yes, I'm in favor. I'm all in favor from the patient side. But absolutely, let's be careful. Let's not get too enthusiastic with everything.
Okay.
Let's do it in the correct way. Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to some questions and answers now. We've got about 10 minutes to do questions and answers because time is going very fast. You mentioned that there was quite a lot of comments online. What I'll do is maybe I'll take 2 questions from in the room first, and then maybe 2 online, and we'll see how we go. So we don't, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you. For this meeting is quite important. Cristina Vaz de Almeida from Portuguese Society of Health Literacy. We know that European population, 50% has a low level of health literacy. And we have millions of people that are info excluded. They don't get the digital. And we talk about data, we are talking about people. So The words most repeated here was trust and transparency. How to get people more trusted if people have low levels of health literacy because they don't access, they don't understand, and they don't use the resources. And between this, there are patients. So I believe that we must go to true competences to get motivation, because with competences, we can increase the empowerment. But I would like to hear, and Professor Johanna, because he's from psychology, and Professor Vytenis, that is, you are not professor, okay. What is the way, the correct way? Because we're not only talking about data, we are talking about people that don't understand for example, the trial by design.
I think it has been mentioned already, and we had a slide, because at some point you say, how are you going to do that? Well, it means talking the language that participants from every walk of life and educational level can understand. And we made that a principle in Facilitate. What is thus important is education, but not education of the participants and patients. It means we have to educate our clinicians to talk in the right way, or use the right, and other stakeholders, and use the right methods. If you have difficulty reading, I have to present it to you in another way. It's an obligation. If we want to make this work, we have to make education and information a central part. Otherwise, you cannot call it patient-centered.
I work in health literacy 20 years from now. 20 years ago, we are talking about to translate the informed consent. And we are 20 years after, we don't work through the informed consent to be clear and understandable.
I work with young people and with adolescents, and we have a project on consent. And the project is, tell me what you will tell a peer about what they need, according to you, what they need to know. And so you use their words. And, but it's a very nice project. But, you know, they are first steps. I agree with you. I've started 20 years ago of trying to make things easy to understand, and we're still not there. But we have to keep repeating that it is central. And so, yeah.
Just
Okay,
we
I
have
think
we have a good
We
example.
might need to move on to the next question. Sorry, I know we're very short on time. I think, was it you that had your hand up? Yeah.
This,
Oh,
my,
was it down here? Yeah. I couldn't see who went first.
Hello, Frank Rademakers. I'm an emeritus professor at the University Hospitals here in Leuven in Belgium. I want to put one thing forward. Data is only relevant when put in the right context. That's already said. The right context is the complete patient record. Patient data in a trial should not be punched out of the electronic health record, which is happening a lot today. So it should be in the health record primarily, and that health record should be completely accessible to patients at all times if they want to do it. But now what we see, you're returning data, but those data are only relevant and important when put in the complete context of that patient journey, which means the health record. So please use the health record as a go-between to do that. That'll answer a lot of the questions that Nadia was raising earlier as well. Put it in the complete context of the
Answer partly, because I think you're right. But for now, we are not there yet. And if you look at the European Health Data Space, where we are going to share health information, clinical trials, clinical research is different because it's research. And as we said, some data have to be evaluated, validated before you can do so. But I agree with you that that would be ultimately where we would like to end up. But we have to make it safe and secure. And for now, we do not have the infrastructure to do so. There's another point of the context that you just mentioned. It is in the context of my patient journey. But participants, when we talk to them, they say two things. I need my data in my data journey, but also I need it in context of the research. Where am I in the results of the study? I think we will work towards adaptation of data in the electronic health record, but I think it will take time, a fair amount of time to get there.
And not every country has, you know, a full electronic health record either, which is a bit of an issue.
It's
So I think I just want to make sure that we'll take one more question here and then we'll go online. Thanks.
Thank you. It's Elisa from Oncidium Foundation. My question is regarding the observation that you have included in the framework, the re-evaluation of what is clinically relevant to be shared and what time. And I'm wondering about orphan disease, ultra rare and rare diseases that wait an enormous amount of time before their data is actually clinically relevant. If you have thought about having those data serving compassionate use or early access for to support the shared decision making for the physicians and patients.
So I just want to understand the question you were asking. Are we intending to include data from compassionate use programs in the evaluation of the data?
Yeah, my question is, given that data are not clinically relevant until they are validated, the time between the end of the trial and the moment they are actually considered clinically relevant and then presented to the regulatory authority can be very long for some diseases, ultra-rare diseases or orphan diseases, even pediatric diseases can be so long that that product could be, or that molecule could be transformative for the disease. So is there a possibility in that time frame to use those data in the context of feeding into compassionate use or early access?
I'm not the right person to really answer that question, but I mean, we do extend access through compassionate use, particularly in rare disease cases, right? And we're extending access to investigational product without having all the data available. That's part of the nature of compassionate use. So to some extent, the answer to your question is yes. But my preferred answer to your question is we would love it if the processes that existed with the regulatory agencies for validating data that is not yet validated could be much, much faster than they are.
That's why having this discussion with all important players around the table is so important. And one important part is having the regulators be part of this discussion.
Do we have here regulators? Yes, because it's very important to raise your question about now you see in the way to plausible approval, you know, it's absolutely, you know, if new approach. And it's so difficult. I see a lot of difficulties. You know, of course, we are speaking of personalized treatment and so on, but it would be good to have regulators around us.
Yeah. Okay, I know we've only 5 minutes left. So do we have a question online? If we can just take one or two and then, I mean, I don't know whether we'll be able to maybe compile some answers afterwards.
No, actually, we received many comments highlighting how much work still needs to be done. However, the majority of the comments express a great appreciation for the work carried out within the FACILITATE project, so thank you. And now I'm going to read one of the questions. So it's from Roxana Albu, and so she wrote, the patient journey within healthcare systems often varies significantly across countries. And I wonder how the principles of FACILITATE could be applied to ensure efficiency while truly reaching patients and their families. At the national level, who should bear responsibility for making this happen? Maybe a bottom-up approach taking reality of the ground into
account and guided by the principles of Facilitate could be that to embedding patient centricity in practice?
That's a long question.
No, well, I think we are very fragmented in Europe and implementation will be difficult. What makes this unique is it's implemented by the sponsor and trials are multinational. In that sense, it's the first step. Now, what barriers we are going to encounter, I think the future will learn. But what we are doing now is we have started pilot studies and we will see in the next couple of months what that implementation in multinational trials, they become evident. So we have to start from the fact that they are implemented already in a multinational setting. And the future will really learn what the problems are and how we can deal with them. So that's why we are piloting.
I think we've only 4 minutes left. So I think that brings us nicely to next steps, Joanna, because you're talking about the pilot studies. We've 6 months left in the project. What are your what are the next steps of what's going to happen in the next 6 months?
In the next 6 months, we are, there are some companies that are part of Facilitate, Sanofi and GSK here present that are piloting. And that means they are going through the motion of implementing RoIPD. At the same time, we are talking with participants and we're trying to guarantee that there is an evaluation also from their part in the process. So we have to build in, have you been informed? Are you, do you understand what data and why and when they can be returned? So we're working on different fronts. And in the end, what we aim to produce in the next 6 months are tools, are practical tools, are guidelines, are logistic models that say, if you have this patient population and so many countries, and this is the number of patients to enroll, this should happen, that should happen, try to look into this. And so we are working towards practical implementation because if we are truly transformative, we have to start there. And so that's our, that's our aim for, I think, finishing Facilitate on a practical note, having set out these principles now. And so.
Anything to add to that?
Nope, completely aligned.
This brings us nicely to a close, and I want to thank everybody, our host, all of our panelists, everyone that's participated online, Daniela for kind of coordinating a lot of this to make it happen today. So thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions and comments that were online. An hour and a half seems to go very fast. So
maybe we can.
You can write.
Yes, and I
file some of the questions and come back by the panelists or from Joanna and Chris to get back to people. We have everyone's email from registering. So yeah, we'll do a follow-up FAQ, I guess, after the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be host. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
I always I'm trying to educate myself, because always I'm looking, seeing, and please keep in mind our 3 days high-level ministerial meeting, because we can propose 8 big points. And one of the points is included exactly topic now. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Have nice.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
I don't know. Do you have time journey home or to stay in Brussels?
Decide to come in, yeah.